Good morning. Welcome to another episode of The World According to Gwen. I live in a beach town, and so I figured doing one of these outside at the beach is at least worth trying once. You'll have to let me know whether or not it's an okay format. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about social boundaries. If you watched the previous video, you know that we're having some conversations about relationships, and there is definitely a reason and a purpose that I'm making this one on social boundaries right now, and that's because this mate of mine asked that I reference my lack of social boundaries in my videos. So this is going to be my shot at that. Social boundaries. Let's break this apart. One is social, which would mean that it has to do with society. Two is boundaries, which is a big topic. And if we put social boundaries together, meaning that they're boundaries that society is okay with. And I'm okay with a lot of society's boundaries, let me say, like not just going around swinging a murdering axe, It's a social norm and a social boundary that people not just go around killing each other blatantly in the streets. We have special times and special places for that kinds of stuff, like the battlefield. I'm also okay with the social norm of keeping sensual things private, because, as we talked about in the other video, it's a sacred space between relationships, and that means we don't take everything way out and in the open. So I'm not a person who's against all social boundaries. Some, a little bit. Some maybe completely, although I'd have to really spend some time thinking about that. And others, I'm totally down for. And it's really interesting, I gotta tell you, because years ago, when I met this mate and we were having a small discussion, I talked with him once about crazy people, and I remember sensing that he felt like I was kind of opening up to him, and this was just a very strictly platonic, semi-professional conversation, because we worked at the same place. And I remember he relaxed and he goes, well, yeah, there are definitely crazy, insane people on the planet, and society needs to be protected from them. And I remember at that moment thinking, thank God, like he's normal and he is somewhat trustworthy, and I can have a little bit of these types of conversations with him. And just to add to the context of things, then later in that conversation, we started talking about whether or not we thought aliens and UFOs were real, and government cover-ups for things, and that was just how that went. But I never forgot it. So now here he is asking me to talk about social boundaries, and I will confess the reason that the thing that I think prompted him to this is that in these throes and tumultuous times that we're in, tells me doesn't want to have anything else to do with me. Let me say that differently. He did not say that he didn't want to have anything else to do with me. He told me that he was done and that I was not his woman. And I'd like to add into that he's told me this multiple times over the last few months, and changed his mind, or maybe not changed his mind is the thing, but we've gone ahead and had greater and more wonderful times and experiences together since he's told me that. So for him to tell me this was not some shock to me. And within like 24 hours of him having told me that, and I had tried to call him a couple of times, and sent a text message over, to which I got no response. I sat quietly with myself for a little while, and I thought, well, what am I going to do today? And it came to me in a very loving, gentle, inspirational kind of way to go ahead and drive over to his home. Um, so, so I did that. And I sent a text message that said as much, that I was going to do that. I got there. He wasn't there at all. I spoke with his elderly parent and housemate, and yeah, he's not here, haven't seen him at all, whatever, and I left. And so I think that he is asking me to elaborate about this lack of social boundaries, because he also texted me to not show up again uninvited. Don't show up again uninvited, and explain your lack of social boundaries on your videos. So here we go. I don't think that what I did was breaching a social boundary. I come from the old school. His parent also comes from the old school. He comes from the old school of like, hey, if you want to see somebody, you just come on by the house, you knock on the door, hi, how are you? They might greet you with a gun. They might ask you to leave immediately, or they might open the door and say, well, why are you here? And then you have a little bit of a hard conversation. Or they might just greet you with open arms. Hey, great, I'm glad you came. You know, I was really wanting to talk with you. Blah, blah, blah. There's all kinds of possibilities that can happen from somebody doing that. It's kind of different and weird today socially. It depends on the age and the generation of people, and I think it also depends on the nature of a relationship with a person, whether or not that's an acceptable thing to do. In my home and in my life, it's still totally acceptable for people to just come by. Hey, how are you? I was just in the neighborhood, thought I'd see how you are. And we do that. And I encourage my children to do that with other people. They are a little bit like, I don't know, Mom, like people don't do that anymore nowadays. Yeah. And I'm like, well, kind of missing out if you're always waiting for permission. And don't you know, we have that great old thing, it's easier to ask forgiveness than to ask permission. And why is that? Because so many people are afraid to actually ask for what they really want. More on that later, I'm sure. And so because this had all been in a like 24, 30-hour period, I didn't think that I was breaching any type of a social boundary. Pushing on it, maybe a little bit. Trying to break it, no. I did what I did. And I especially am interested in hearing from viewers whether or not you think what I did was a breach of a social boundary. So there was that. Society, you know, society has all kinds of rules, ideas, unspoken contracts that we're literally born into. You ever thought about that? Like the difference between how you function and operate as an individual from how a person born on the other side of the world, or maybe even 2 or 3 counties over, deals with and experiences life because of the social norms that they've been raised with. That's a fascinating subject and topic, and something to think about. And then the boundary part, as I said in the prior one, right? Relationships are sacred ground, and it's what transpires between the two people, and gotta add into it that ever-present, omnipresent, omnipotent third entity, the all-seeing eye of God, all-seeing eye of Source, that knows whether or not I was trying to be brazen or flippant or aggressive or crazy or mad, you know, going ahead and driving over to his house, or if I was coming humbly with a generous heart, with a certain amount of fear and respect for what I was doing, realizing that I had no idea what was going to happen. And it also knows the same for him, you know. Why wasn't he there? Why didn't he respond to my text messages or the couple of phone calls that I had made to let him know? And to be clear, because my nickname is Crystal Clear, because I do like for things to be clear, like crystal. I called several times because where he lives there's not good cell reception, and so a lot of the time the phone won't actually get the calls or the text messages, depending on where you are in the property. So it's a little bit of a pain that way with the phones. So, I almost lost my train of thought. Help me get that back. I wanted to preface that I know that I went afraid. Over the years, sometimes if I have a difficult time making a decision about something, and whether it's something serious or, let's just say it's something that I consider serious, like a serious choice or a serious turning point. Over the years, after I read The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, and he talks about the little boy pulling out the disc, and whether it's the black one or the white one, not knowing, and then being willing to go with it. For me, it's become like an act of faith. To say my little prayer, tell me so and tell me true, only what's best for me and you. Heads I do it, tails I don't. Because everything really does come down to that. Yes or no. And if yes, then there's multiple ways of doing yes. And if no, then there's multiple ways of not of doing no. And so I was concerned about whether or not I was making the right choice or taking the right action. And I stopped on the side of the road and considered all my choices. And I picked up my quarter and I held it in my hand for a long time, and I set myself in that special place inside. And I said my prayer. I flipped my coin and it said heads go. And I was like, okay, well, we're going. Meaning me and Source. I'm going. You know it. I don't. And we'll see what happens. And I'm not exaggerating when I tell you that as I drove down the road and to the house, I was a little bit afraid. And some people would call that stepping outside of your comfort zone. Some people would say, oh, well, if you're afraid, then you know you definitely should not have been doing it, because if you're actually doing everything just exactly right, there's no fear. If you don't experience fear, experience, that's a key word with it, experience fear, then I think it's likely that probably very deeply rooted anxieties inside, because fear is part of our mechanism to let us know what we're doing. Does it feel good? No. Is it a little bit awkward? Yes, at times. Can it, if it's really loud and blaring at you that something is very dangerous, that's a different type of thing. For me at this point in juncture, I was trusting that I wasn't going to be greeted at the door with a gun. I had mentally kind of prepared myself for that, there could be another woman there. He might not be there at all. He might yell and scream and poke at me and, shoo, go away, or all of these types of things. And was like, okay, well, I'm willing to experience the consequences of my choices because I took the time to prepare myself before going and felt like I was going with a certain amount of grace with me. So, is that a lack of social boundaries? I don't think so. In relationships, when we have these push-pull dynamics, I want you go away, I want you go away, I want you go away, or times of redefining and redetermining our intention. I'm not going to say will, but times of redetermining our intention for ourselves and for the relationship. Things are flexible. But it is hot as Hades right here, you should know, sitting right in the direct bright sun. But I can't help it. I do love the sun, and I love the heat too. So So, my thinking right now is that we're in this tumultuous relationship time, in a time of considering, evaluating, determining, deciding our intentions for self, and whether or not we want to make a we. So that means we have to try out a couple of different things and see how it goes. There's about 4,000 other things that I actually want to make videos about, and I'm thinking that today will be a day that I spend the time at least making the playlists for them to help me go back to them. I don't think of myself as a person with a total lack of social boundaries. I think by most people's standards, most people would see me as a person who respects social boundaries. You know, some people are kind of uptight. I live on the beach. I'm used to bodies. I'm used to skin. I work as a registered nurse. I'm a licensed massage therapist. I was a hot yoga teacher for a very, very long time. Not just a hot yoga teacher. Forgive me. I am a Bikram yoga teacher. So social norms, right? A lot of people are not used to seeing quite so much skin and flesh and bodies as I am. And I see it here at the beach all the time. There'll be people that come to the beach and they have on full, thick, heavy t-shirts. Some of them have long pants, and they aren't showing any skin. And they might look at other people and go, wow, like, oh my God, I didn't know that's what, you know, so many different bodies could look like. And then we have other people who wear almost no covering at all, which I see as a breach of a social norm. You know, that's a lack of social boundaries. Walking up to people, cussing them upside and down, inside and out, being exceptionally short-tempered with people either in person or on the phone because, oh, I don't know, they cut you off in traffic, or they, see, it's hard for me to even think of that kind of stuff. Yeah, that's not the way I normally operate in this world. And I'm not really interested in changing that. For crying out loud, making these YouTube videos and making this kind of stuff public for me is like a breach of social boundaries, and I have to keep that kind of in check to myself. That like, no, this is okay. This is I'm open to having a one-on-one conversation with anybody that wants to. This is my attempt at starting the dialogue. And yeah, I guess they are a little bit of monologue in this type of a format, but what else are you going to do? You probably already watched 10 million other YouTube videos and listened to somebody else's monologue about God only knows what. Why does this have to be? What makes this any different? And if you're like, well, because I know you, well, yeah, you're right. That is what makes it different. It's personal. And how we take things personally, or more like how we don't take things personally, and whether or not we get along with that idea that it's a sacred space between people when we bring them into our personal lives. Like, this is real life, kids. This is real life, my fellow humans. So I think that's what I got for now. Om Shanti Namaste. Peace and love of the universe be with you. God bless you always. See you next time.